When we talk about focusing on ourselves, there's something deeply misunderstood in today's culture. Growth has become a performance. People are documenting every minor step, every new book they read, every morning routine, every workout session, as if growth only becomes real when it is validated by others. But the truth is, the most meaningful transformation you will ever experience won't be seen, won't be posted, won't even be fully understood by the people around you. It happens quietly, in the private moments when nobody is watching. That is where real self-growth lies. Think about the process of a seed. Nobody applauds it when it's buried underground. It doesn't post updates about its progress. It simply sits in the dark, vulnerable to the soil pressing down on it. And yet, in that silence and obscurity, something miraculous happens. Roots begin to form, strength begins to build, and eventually it breaks through the surface into the light. But notice this, it doesn't rush to prove itself to anyone. Its power comes from what it developed in the unseen stages of its growth. In the same way, your own evolution doesn't need to be broadcasted. In fact, when you announce too early, when you explain every detail of what you're becoming, you actually weaken the energy that's meant to sustain you. The more you talk, the less you build, because talking creates an illusion of accomplishment. It tricks the brain into feeling like progress has been made, when in reality, the work hasn't even been done yet. Silence protects your process. It creates a sacred container where your energy can gather, intensify, and align with the vision you hold for yourself. Without that container, your energy leaks out. It gets diluted by opinions, by doubts, by the need for validation. How often have you shared an idea or a new goal with someone, only to feel their skepticism or their small comment deflate your enthusiasm? That's what happens when you let others into your process too soon. Their words take root in your mind, and suddenly you start questioning yourself. But when you keep your growth private, you allow it to unfold without interference. It becomes your own laboratory, where you can experiment, fail, adjust, and learn without an audience waiting to judge the outcome. Privacy gives you freedom. It gives you the space to stumble, to doubt, to get back up, without turning it into a performance. Philosophically, this aligns with the idea that real change happens in consciousness before it manifests in the external world. If you look at the great thinkers, inventors, spiritual teachers, they all had periods of silence, of retreat, of going inward. They didn't share every step. They allowed their vision to form in the unseen until it was strong enough to stand in the visible. This is why focusing only on yourself in silence becomes such a powerful act. It's not selfish, it's necessary. You are cultivating the inner architecture that will eventually shape your outer reality. And let's be clear, this doesn't mean you isolate yourself forever. It doesn't mean you cut off the world. It means you understand that transformation has phases. In the early stages, it requires solitude, reflection, and a kind of sacred secrecy. Just as you wouldn't expose a fragile seedling to a storm before it's strong enough to withstand it, you don't expose your inner growth before it has matured. Once your roots are deep, once your identity has shifted, once your actions align consistently with the person you are becoming, then the world will naturally see the results. You won't even need to explain. So the challenge is this: can you be content with unseen progress? Can you honor the quiet, private victories that nobody else will clap for? Because those are the victories that matter most. Waking up one day and choosing discipline over distraction. Resisting the urge to prove yourself and instead proving it only to yourself. Choosing silence when ego wants to speak. Those small, private decisions create the momentum that leads to lasting transformation. The paradox is that when you stop trying to show everyone who you are becoming, you actually become it faster. You're no longer performing. You're embodying. And embodiment is what changes a life. So I leave you with this: growth is not a spectacle. It is a sacred act. Protect it. Keep it private. Let it happen in silence. And when the time is right, your results will speak for you far louder than your words ever could. Silence is often misunderstood. Most people associate silence with weakness, with passivity, with the absence of a voice. But the truth is, silence is one of the most powerful states you can cultivate if you learn how to use it. Because silence is not empty. It's full. It's full of awareness, full of observation, full of energy that's no longer being scattered in unnecessary conversations or arguments. Silence gathers your power back into yourself. And when that power is concentrated, clarity emerges. We live in a world of noise. Constant opinions, notifications, debates, judgments. Everyone is rushing to speak, to respond, to be heard. But in that rush, very few are actually listening. Very few are actually understanding. And so what we get is endless chatter without insight, reaction without reflection. If you step back and simply remain quiet, you begin to notice things that others are too distracted to see. You notice patterns in people's behavior. You sense the motives behind their words. You observe the subtleties in situations. And that awareness gives you an advantage that talking never will. Psychologically, silence creates space between stimulus and response. When you don't immediately react, you give your mind the room to process, to evaluate, to choose your response instead of being driven by impulse. This is what Viktor Frankl spoke about. That space between stimulus and response is where your freedom lies. In silence, you reclaim that freedom. You're no longer controlled by what others say or do. You are in control of how you interpret and respond to it. There's also a deeper dimension here. The brain is constantly producing thoughts, and most of those thoughts are repetitive, recycled from yesterday, last week, last year. They run on autopilot. When you fill your environment with noise, you give those thought patterns even more fuel. But when you cultivate silence, you interrupt the cycle. You create stillness where the constant chatter of the mind begins to slow down. And in that slowing, clarity appears. You start to see what really matters. You begin to separate the noise of conditioning from the signal of truth. Philosophically, silence is the foundation of wisdom. Every tradition, from Eastern meditation to Western philosophy, has emphasized the necessity of quieting the mind. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But you cannot examine life if your attention is constantly drowned out by noise. Meditation, contemplation, deep reflection, they all begin with silence. Silence is not withdrawal from life. It is preparation for living it with awareness. Notice too how silence strengthens you in ways that talking never can. When you don't feel the need to explain yourself, to justify your actions, or to constantly defend your choices, you become unshakable. You develop an inner confidence that doesn't rely on external validation. People may misunderstand you. They may project their assumptions onto your silence, but it doesn't matter. Because in that silence, you know who you are and what you're working toward. And that inner certainty is far stronger than the fleeting approval of others. Think of the great leaders, the individuals who carried presence. Their power wasn't in how much they spoke, but in how little they needed to. Their silence carried weight because it came from clarity, from alignment with themselves. When they did speak, every word mattered. And that is the essence of true influence, not quantity, but quality. This is something you can practice daily. Instead of rushing to answer, pause. Instead of filling every gap in conversation, allow silence to exist. Instead of broadcasting every thought you have, let some of them remain within you. You'll be surprised how much more you perceive, how much stronger you feel when you don't feel compelled to always make noise. And here's the paradox. When you embrace silence, you don't become invisible. You actually become more noticeable. People begin to sense something different about you, a depth, a centeredness. They lean in when you finally choose to speak because they know you've been listening, observing, thinking. Silence doesn't erase your presence, it amplifies it. So reflect on this. Silence is not the absence of strength, it is the proof of it. Anyone can talk. Anyone can argue. Anyone can fill space with words. But it takes discipline to remain quiet, to listen deeply, to hold your energy within. That discipline is where clarity is born, and clarity is the foundation of power. Remember, your silence is not emptiness. It is your strength gathering, your clarity sharpening. Protect it. Use it, and when the time comes to speak or act, you'll move with a precision that noise can never produce. One of the most subtle yet destructive habits we've developed as human beings is comparison. It happens almost automatically. We scroll through someone else's life online. We see what they have, what they've achieved, where they are in their journey, and instantly, without even realizing it, we measure ourselves against them. This constant mental scoreboard creates a distorted perception of who we are and where we should be. And if you are trying to grow, nothing will rob you of progress faster than comparison. Comparison is dangerous because it distracts you from the only place where real transformation happens: within yourself. The moment you start looking outward to measure your worth, your focus shifts away from your own path. Instead of cultivating your unique strengths, you begin chasing shadows of other people's lives. You dilute your energy trying to replicate, imitate, or compete with something that was never meant to be yours in the first place. And what happens? Progress stalls. Growth weakens. You end up frustrated, not because you aren't capable, but because you've forgotten that your path is meant to be your own. Psychologically, comparison creates a feedback loop of inadequacy. The brain is wired to notice differences. It's a survival mechanism. But when that wiring is hijacked by a culture obsessed with appearances and external validation, it turns into self-sabotage. Each time you compare, your brain generates feelings of lack, and those feelings influence your behaviors. You might give up too early, doubt your abilities, or overcompensate with actions that don't align with your authentic self. In other words, comparison hijacks your growth by pulling you into someone else's script. But here's the deeper truth: comparison is an illusion. You are never comparing your real self to someone else's real self. You're comparing your private struggles to their public highlights. You're comparing your unfiltered journey to their curated image. And this illusion keeps you stuck because you're battling something that isn't even real. Philosophically, think of it like this: two lives are meant to be identical. Just as no two trees in a forest grow in the same shape, at the same pace, under the same conditions, no two human journeys are meant to unfold in exactly the same way. Some trees grow quickly, shooting upward. Others grow slowly, developing deep, strong roots before ever reaching high. If a tree were to spend its time resenting the one next to it, it would waste the energy required for its own growth. The same is true for you. The more you compare, the more you starve your own development. When you stay focused only on yourself, progress becomes sustainable. You begin to measure your growth, not against someone else's life, but against who you were yesterday. That's the only comparison that matters. Am I more disciplined than I was last week? Am I clearer in my intentions than I was last month? Am I living closer to my truth than I was last year? These are the questions that fuel real progress. Because when the reference point is yourself, you're no longer running someone else's race. You're running your own. This is not just a psychological trick. It's a spiritual practice. Focusing only on your own journey requires humility, patience, and self-awareness. It requires trusting that the timing of your life is not late, it's not early, it's precise. The comparison mindset says, I should be further along by now. The self-focused mindset says, I am exactly where I need to be to learn what I need to learn. And from that place, growth accelerates because you're not wasting energy on distractions. Think about how much energy is lost when you live in comparison. Every ounce of envy, jealousy, or resentment drains you. But when you turn that energy inward, when you invest it into your own growth, your own vision, you become unstoppable. You redirect the very fuel that used to burn you into the fire that builds you. And here's the paradox: when you stop comparing, you not only grow faster, you also develop a sense of peace. You no longer feel rushed. You no longer feel behind. You realize that life is not a race with a single finish line. It's an unfolding. And each unfolding happens in its own rhythm, in its own way. So I leave you with this thought: comparison destroys progress because it makes you forget who you are. Focus only on yourself, and you'll discover that your greatest competition is not with others, it's with your own potential. And when you commit to beating that every single day, you win in the only race that actually matters. One of the greatest tests you will face on the path of growth is distraction. Not the obvious kind, like your phone lighting up with notifications or people inviting you out when you should be working. But the subtle distractions, the ones that come in the form of criticism, opinions, expectations, and the endless noise of people trying to pull you away from your center. If you're not disciplined, you'll get lost in that noise. And once you're lost, progress slows, energy drains, and your vision begins to blur. Discipline is not just about routine or structure. It's about protecting your attention, because attention is life. Whatever you focus on, you feed. And if your focus is constantly pulled toward what others are saying or thinking, then you're no longer feeding your own growth. You're feeding their voices. That's why silence, which we've already talked about, pairs perfectly with discipline. Together, they form a shield. Discipline says, I will not be swayed by every distraction. Silence says, I do not need to respond to every distraction. When you put those two together, you create a force of stability that allows you to stay centered even in a chaotic world. Psychologically, the brain is wired for novelty. It craves stimulation, validation, and feedback. This is why distractions are so tempting. Every time you check to see what someone thinks about you, or you react to a piece of gossip, or you respond to criticism, your brain lights up with the illusion of significance. But it's just that, an illusion, because while the brain gets its little hit of stimulation, your deeper self gets weaker. You've just surrendered your power to someone else's narrative. Discipline interrupts this cycle. Discipline trains the mind to stay loyal to a deeper vision rather than short-term impulses. It's the voice that says, I don't need to prove myself right now. I don't need to defend myself against every opinion. My energy is better invested in building myself than explaining myself. That's a radical shift. Instead of scattering your energy outward, you begin directing it inward, where it multiplies into strength. Philosophically, discipline is freedom. At first, it feels restrictive, saying no to distractions, staying silent when you want to react, holding your energy when you want to explode. But over time, that very restriction liberates you. Why? Because you're no longer enslaved by impulses or external triggers. You move from being reactive to being intentional. And when your life is intentional, you're no longer at the mercy of what others say or do. You live aligned with your own center. There will always be people who misunderstand you. They'll question your choices. They'll criticize your silence. They'll project their insecurities onto your journey. That's inevitable. But here's the truth: none of that can touch you unless you let it. It only has power when you give it your attention. Without your attention, it dissolves. Discipline is the practice of guarding that attention fiercely as if it were your most valuable currency, because it is. Think about how much time and energy is lost in defending, explaining, reacting. Hours wasted in arguments that don't matter. Days consumed by replaying what someone said about you. Weeks lost comparing yourself to people who aren't even part of your destiny. All of that could have been fuel for your growth if only you had the discipline to stay silent, to stay focused, to stay in your lane. And this is where courage comes in, because discipline requires the courage to be misunderstood. It requires the strength to walk away from battles that your ego desperately wants to fight. It requires the humility to know that your silence is not weakness, it's strategy. You're not avoiding the fight. You're choosing a higher one. You're fighting against distraction, against impulse, against the part of yourself that wants the comfort of validation more than the discomfort of growth. The paradox is that when you live with this kind of discipline, the distractions don't just lose their power. They eventually disappear. People stop expecting reactions from you because they realize you don't give them. The noise quiets because you no longer feed it. And in that quiet, your vision becomes clear, your energy grows, and your progress accelerates. So I leave you with this: you cannot control the noise of the world, but you can control your response to it. Choose discipline over distraction. Protect your attention as if your future depends on it, because it does. And when you master that, you'll realize that silence and discipline together are not limitations, but the very keys to your freedom. If there is one resource you can never afford to waste, it is your energy. Money can be lost and earned again. Time, while irreversible, can be managed with discipline. But energy, that subtle combination of your attention, your emotions, and your focus, is the very currency of life. And yet, most people spend it carelessly. They give it away to arguments that don't matter, to conversations that drain them, to proving themselves to people who aren't even invested in their growth. Every time you engage with negativity, every time you explain yourself unnecessarily, every time you let someone else pull you into their drama, you are spending energy you will never get back. The tragedy is not that energy is finite. It's that most people don't even realize how much of it they're leaking. Think about it. How many times have you replayed a negative comment in your head for hours, sometimes days, long after the moment has passed? How often do you feel tired, not because of what you did physically, but because of the weight of emotional conversations or the pressure of external expectations? That's energy being drained invisibly. You can't always see it, but you can feel the depletion. From a psychological standpoint, energy follows focus. Wherever your attention goes, your energy flows. If your attention is on what people think of you, you're giving them your energy. If your attention is on what others are saying or doing, you're pouring your life force into their story. instead of your own. And the more you scatter your energy outward, the less you have available for the one thing that truly matters: your own growth and vision. But when you learn to protect your energy, something remarkable happens. You begin to consolidate it. You stop scattering it across meaningless distractions, and you start directing it like a laser. And that's when transformation accelerates, because focused energy creates momentum. Momentum creates consistency, and consistency builds the future you're working toward. Philosophically, protecting your energy is an act of self-respect. It's an acknowledgement that your life is too valuable to be wasted on the noise of others. Think of it like carrying a bucket of water through the desert. Every small hole in that bucket is a leak of survival. If you don't patch those leaks, if you don't protect what you're carrying, you won't make it. Your energy is that bucket. Every unnecessary reaction, every argument, every distraction is a leak. Protecting your energy is about patching those leaks so that you can arrive where you're meant to go with your strength intact. This is why silence is powerful. It's not just about avoiding words, it's about conserving energy. When you stop explaining yourself, you save energy. When you stop defending your every move, you save energy. When you stop chasing validation, you save energy. And the energy you save can now be invested where it matters: on your growth, on your vision, on your peace. Protecting your energy also means being selective with your environment. The people you surround yourself with, the conversations you allow, the content you consume, all of it either replenishes you or depletes you. Most people live passively, consuming anything and everything, absorbing energies that do not serve them. But when you become intentional, when you choose carefully what and who you give your energy to, your life shifts. Suddenly, you're not running on empty. You're running with clarity and strength. The paradox here is that the more you protect your energy, the more powerful your presence becomes. People notice it. They sense it. They can't explain why, but they feel something different about you. That difference is simply the result of energy no longer wasted outward, but gathered inward. And that gathered energy radiates. It doesn't need to be spoken. It doesn't need to be explained. It simply emanates. But protecting your energy requires boundaries. And boundaries are uncomfortable because they force you to say no when the world wants you to say yes. They force you to walk away from people or situations that don't align. They force you to remain silent when your ego wants to respond. And yet that discomfort is the price of power. Without it, you remain scattered, leaking energy into places that don't deserve it. So the question is, where is your energy going? Who or what are you giving it to that doesn't deserve it? And what would your life look like if you redirected all that energy back into yourself, into your growth, into the vision of the life you want to live? Protect your energy as if your future depends on it, because it does. Every leak you close, every distraction you resist, every unnecessary word you withhold, you gain strength. And that strength, compounded daily, becomes the force that transforms your life. Remember this: your energy is your power. Guard it fiercely. Direct it wisely. And watch how quickly your silent focus turns into undeniable results. At the end of the day, no matter how much you say, explain, or try to prove, it is your results that will do the talking. Words are fragile. They can be doubted, twisted, or ignored. But results are undeniable. You can argue with an opinion, but you cannot argue with evidence. And the evidence of your growth, your discipline, your silence, it eventually speaks in ways far louder and clearer than any words you could use to justify yourself. This is why focusing only on yourself and staying silent as you grow is so powerful, Because while everyone else is busy talking, you are busy building. While they are defending their choices, you are quietly living yours. While they are explaining who they want to become, you are already becoming it. And when the time comes, when your results appear, they cannot be ignored. Think about how this works psychologically. The human mind is conditioned to respond to proof, not promises. When you say, I'm going to change, I'm going to succeed, I'm going to transform, the brain feels a temporary satisfaction, as if progress has already been made. But without action, those words quickly dissolve into emptiness. On the other hand, when you hold back from speaking and simply act, the brain begins rewiring itself differently. Each action reinforces a new identity. Each silent decision accumulates into momentum. And over time, those silent choices become a visible reality that no one can deny. It's the difference between potential and embodiment. Talking about change is potential. It's the idea of what could be. Living silently in discipline and focus is embodiment. It's the reality of what is. And the world doesn't respond to potential, it responds to embodiment. When you embody strength, focus, and transformation, people feel it without you needing to say a word. Philosophically, this ties back to one of life's most profound truths: being is greater than saying. Anyone can declare who they are, but very few can live it consistently enough for the results to show. Your being, your actions, your energy, your results becomes your language. And that language is universal. It needs no explanation, no defense, no translation. It is self-evident. This is why you must resist the temptation to explain your process. Let people doubt. Let them question. Let them misunderstand. None of that matters, because your results will eventually silence the noise. The same people who once doubted you will one day be forced to acknowledge your transformation. Not because you argued with them, not because you proved them wrong, but because your results stood as proof. But here's the key: results don't appear overnight. And that's why silence and focus are essential. In the beginning stages, your results are invisible. Nobody sees you waking up early. Nobody sees you choosing discipline over distraction. Nobody sees the inner battles you fight in silence. But all of those invisible choices accumulate. Slowly, they become visible. Slowly, they crystallize into undeniable outcomes. And when those outcomes appear, they speak for you. There is a kind of quiet confidence that comes when you know you no longer need to explain yourself. You're not living for applause. You're not trying to convince anyone. You're simply living in alignment. And the irony is, the less you try to prove, the more undeniable you become. People respect results. They may not admit it, but they cannot ignore it. This is why protecting your energy, embracing silence, and focusing inward are not just ideas. They're strategies. They're the path to a life where your existence becomes the proof of your philosophy. You don't need to say, I've changed. You don't need to say, I'm successful. You don't need to say, I'm different now. The way you carry yourself, the reality you've built, the results you embody, those will speak for you. So the question is, what do you want your results to say? Because they will say something, whether you're conscious of it or not. If you scatter your energy, your results will show it. If you let comparison consume you, your results will reveal it. But if you stay silent, focused, disciplined, your results will tell a story of strength, clarity, and transformation. And when that story speaks, it will echo far louder than any words you could ever use. So I leave you with this: stop telling the world who you are becoming. Become it. Let your silence protect your process, and let your results speak the truth. Because when results speak, nobody can deny them.